everyone, welcome to Taylor Time. I am Taylor, and today we are here at Mrs. Joy's Bakery in Lynchburg. This is Mrs. Joy.
Hi.
So, what will we be making today? There's a lot of things on the table.
Yes, today we're going to be making shortbread,
Oh, wow.
but we're going to make shortbread with a twist because we're going to use it as a cookie topper for a cake.
Yes, I make cakes all the time. That'll be great. So, how do we get started? I see a bunch of things here.
So some people may or may not have a mixer, and this is one of those things that you can do by hand. You don't have to have a mixer for it.
Yes.
So, but here at our shop, we make so much of it, I'm not going to do that by hand. So what we need to start with is butter, flour, sugar, and salt. If you can remember butter, flour, sugar, and salt, then you're good. And the reason why I started making shortbread is because we used to do a lot of decorated cookies and they were sugar cookies, but sugar cookies cost more to make.
Yeah.
And the price of vanilla skyrocketed. So we stopped using so much vanilla. As a matter of fact, this recipe eliminates vanilla altogether because when you have shortbread, all you care about is the flavor of the butter.
Yeah.
So flour, sugar, butter, and salt, that's all you need for the recipe.
It makes it a lot simpler. Just
It does.
makes it quick to make too, especially when you have a shop. And you
It
have
really
orders.
is. It's a lot less labor intensive than a sugar cookie.
Yes.
And it also removes the eggs, so you don't have to worry about the price of that going, because they go up every day. They go up and down. It just price fluctuates so much. So with the flour and the sugar and the butter and the salt, the thing that I like to do is when I'm teaching my classes, because we do decorating classes here, is to make sure that people understand if you want a good product, and I know you know this, if you want a good product, you have to use good ingredients.
Yes.
So what
It's
I
very
would
important.
recommend using for the flour, I always use King Arthur's. And then for the butter, we always use unsalted butter. And then for my salt, I use sea salt. And that's the only brand sea salt I'll use. I'm not going to tell all my business, but that's the only sea salt I use. And then for the sugar, I just want to make sure that I'm using pure sugarcane sugar. Because there's two types of sugar that flood the market. One is sugarcane and the other one is beet sugar. I like to stick with sugarcane because it just, it behaves the same all the time. Whether you're making candy, cookies, cakes, whatever, it behaves the same all the time. So those are the 4 things that you need to know before you dive into your recipe. And so what we want to do first off, I guess we're going to need a mixer, and we're just going to throw things in that mixer. So this butter is cold, so what you're going to need to do is cut it into chunks. And this mixer is kind of on the big side, so you don't have to cut it into small pieces. So like each side, if you cut it into quarters, it'll be fine.
Okay.
But if I were using my little KitchenAid, I would probably cut it smaller so as not to overwork the mixer because it's cold butter. And also if we were doing it by hand, we cut it with a grater. I just grate that because I want to give myself carpal tunnel.
Yeah.
And while you cut that, and I call that my butter knife because it's not sharp enough to cut anything but butter. While you do that, I've got 1 cup of sugar here measured. And usually we weigh our ingredients, but shortbread is not one of those things that's so temperamental that you have to worry
super
about
sensitive.
it. This is one of those things, if you go over a little bit or under a little bit, it's not going to kill anything.
A lot of cake recipes that I use are very sensitive, and you have to add the right amount of sugar, or it'll caramelize too much.
Yeah,
It'll
you have
come
those brown
too
edges
dark.
that nobody wants to have.
Yeah.
But for this, brown is good.
Is this a good size? Or should I cut it a little bit smaller?
I
Or-
would cut each of those in half and then half again.
This is a huge stand mixer bowl.
Yeah, this
Very
is 10
handy.
quarts.
I know this comes in really handy.
It does, but the 30 quart is my favorite. I'm looking for a 60 quart now.
Oh, wow.
That, because we're going to have to start making a lot of cookie dough. Okay, so here's the thing about shortbread. Most recipes call for you to cream the butter and the sugar together, and we don't want to do that. We just want to get rid of all of the sugar at the bottom of the bowl. So go ahead and throw the sugar in, and we're going to put some salt in as well. So for my recipes, what I do, if I have 2 cups of flour, that's how I measure it. If I have 2 cups of flour, I know I need at least 1 teaspoon of salt. And that's what I always go by. I don't care what I'm making. It's 1 teaspoon of salt per 2 cups of flour, or else it'll taste bland.
Yeah.
And more than that usually tastes too salty. So we're going to use, because we put in the recipe is this. You use half as much sugar as butter and twice as much flour as butter. half as much sugar as butter and twice as much flour as butter. That's the recipe. So whatever butter you use, everything else is based on that. So we just put in 2 cups of butter. You just added 1 cup of sugar. So now we're going to need 4 cups of flour.
Oh, it kind of adds up.
Yeah. So I'm going to let you go. And we're not going to be perfect about it. Normally, again, I would weigh my flour. And for my recipe, I do weigh it. But today, we're just having a good time. So we're just going to use cups.
Okay.
So go ahead and just scoop 4 and put them in the bowl.
All right.
And because you are using 4 cups of flour, we need to have 2 teaspoons of salt. And this is a 2 teaspoon measuring spoon. And I'm just going to tip that on in there. All right, so we've got everything on there. And then all we have to do is take a flat paddle, stick it on here, and just let it go. And it's
very
just
simple.
It is. And it's just going to mix on the lowest speed you can mix it on, the lowest speed. If you're doing it by hand, you're just going to keep mixing it until it's all incorporated together. And it takes a great long time, which is why I don't do it by hand.
Yeah.
But little Scottish grandmother that I learned this recipe from, she did everything by hand. So, but she wasn't making it for hundreds of people every day, though. She's probably just making it for her grandkids. So we would put the flat beater on, let that go for probably about 10 minutes until it's all forms one dough. And I've got one over here that's already ready to go. Here we go. Ooh, yeah. So let's get some gloves on. One thing that I'm sure already know that you cannot mess with food coloring without gloves on.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. I end up with food coloring under my nails, just all
everywhere.
my clothes, all staining my hands. It's horrible.
You look like you have mechanic's hands by the time you're finished. So this is a pretty stiff dough, and that's okay. It's okay for it to be crumbly, as long as when you pick it up, if you can squeeze it and it makes a nice ball and it holds its shape, then you're good. But you don't want to handle it too much because our hands are hot and we want the butter to stay cold. So I'm going to take this out. Lay that to the side. About this much is what you'll need.
Okay. I already know these are going to be good. They smell delicious.
It's that butter smell. But then once the butter bakes, it smells like this. It has this warm, nutty smell to it. It is even better. And the best thing about shortbread to me is that it's not too sweet. Yeah. That's my favorite part. I don't like treats that are seriously sweet.
Especially with all the icing that goes on it as well.
And that is why they work so well as a decorated cookie. There's 2 reasons they work as a decorated cookie. A lot of people make decorated cookies for the holidays. They make a sugar cookie recipe, cut it out, throw it in the oven. By the time it comes out, it looks like something totally different than what they put it in because it's changed shapes. Shortbread doesn't have a leavening agent in it, and so it holds its shape perfectly. You'll see that when we make these cookies. So you said you wanted orange.
Yes,
I'm going to use
my favorite color. I love orange.
Use yellow. And I'm just going to squirt just enough to color it. So it depends on what you're coloring. And you'll see the amount of food coloring fluctuates depending on what you're coloring. If we were coloring royal icing, it would only take a little. If we were coloring buttercream, it would take a little more. But because we're coloring this cookie dough, it's going to take a lot more. So I'm just going to go in with my gloves. And don't worry about it being all over your gloves because as you work it, it just comes off your gloves and goes into the dough.
This is why it's imperative to have gloves because my hands will be stained really bad.
Highly, yeah.
And it can be kind of hard to get off too.
It gets out of your clothing okay because it's a water-based colorant, but it takes forever to get out of your skin for some strange reason. Okay, yours is orange and mine's supposed to be egg yellow.
You think I have enough or should I add a little bit more?
No, you're gonna add as you need it.
Okay.
But it will absorb as you need. So just make sure that it's all the way distributed before you add more. And you can also add things like chopped nuts, chocolate flakes.
Oh, yes, my mom would love that.
Sprinkles, dried cherry, any dried fruit really, especially freeze-dried fruit would work nicely. You can always add extract, but you have to be careful about that. You can't add too much because the liquid will change the texture of the dough, even if it is an extract, which is mostly alcohol. All right, so this is my color. You got a little bit more squeezing to do.
Yeah. Mine is kind of like a marble now. I got to get it to a solid color.
Although a marble is not bad.
Yes. Very pretty. I see a lot of marble designs used on cake. Like, have you ever heard of like mirror glaze cakes?
Yeah. I've always wanted to do one, but I've never done one. It's got gelatin in that glaze, and it makes me think it's going to taste horrible because gelatin doesn't taste that good. But I guess the white chocolate ganache part of it kills that flavor. Have you ever done one?
I did one a couple years ago, but it didn't turn out very well. I haven't done one since. I don't really know why, but
so what kind of gelatin did you use?
I think I used either the sheets. I can't remember if it was the sheets or the powder gelatin.
So the sheet is what you need to use.
Yes.
Okay, so I think I'm ready to roll mine out.
I think
you
I'm
are
almost there.
So now I'm going to roll this dough out, but what you don't want to do is add more flour to your dough. And a lot of people like to add flour to the counter, put their dough in it and roll it and put flour on the rolling pin. And by the time you're done with all of that, you've added another 1/4 cup of flour to your recipe, and that will dry out your cookie even more. So to keep from having to deal with that, I just roll mine between 2 sheets of plastic wrap. And we're going to make some pretty thick cookies. I'm going to move this over here for you. So, you're a little messy, aren't you?
Yeah, a little bit. Whoa.
Just a little bit.
You should see my kitchen whenever I do cakes. It is horrible.
The best thing about having a shop is that you get to pay other people to clean up.
It makes things go faster, too.
It does. When you're doing it all by yourself, it's so hard. I remember doing it at home. See, your dough looks perfect now. So you can toss it on up there and try to put it in a mound right there in the middle. So these are going to be pretty thick because we're going to use them as cake toppers. Okay, and now we're going to cover your other one with another sheet of plastic. And so just in case you don't really care to cut your cookie dough, you're just making it ahead of time, because you can do that, stick this in the freezer and just pull it out as you need it. So I've rolled it out to the thickness I want. If I were just going to be putting it in the freezer, in it would go on a sheet pan just like this, and I'd just stick it in the freezer until I needed it. And so what we're going to do is cut out our cookies. And we're going to do 3 different sizes because we're going to do 3 cookie toppers for our cakes. And when you finish doing all the dough, you just put it back together and roll it all over again. But what I think would be pretty is if we mix our 2 colors together.
Ooh, make a marble kind of thing.
Yeah. You just lift it up and push it. And they don't have to be frozen.
Saves a lot of time doing it this way.
Yeah, and so what I'm going to do is shove this in here. And you see how it's messing up just a little bit? That's okay, because when I put it down there, I'm going to mash it and make sure. But yours are thicker than mine, so yours might not do it as bad as mine. Do you have any food markers?
Yes, I actually do. I haven't used them, though, yet.
But you can for this. So we're going to decorate some of them with just a plain white face. And those are the ones you can write whatever message that needs to be written on it. Happy birthday, congratulations, rest in peace. So I'm just using meringue powder, powdered sugar, and water. for this. And the meringue powder already has a vanilla in it. It's not real vanilla, but it tastes pretty good. It's not so bad. So I don't even bother to add flavoring into it because that's more money. You know, and every time you add something to something, it's going to cost you more money. So you want to keep the cost as low as possible to make sure you maximize on your profit. So I had already made this and it was in the freezer. And so I've let it sit out now for about an hour, but it doesn't take that long to thaw out. And all we have to do to make it work is add some water and some food coloring and we're good to go. So your color is going to be orange and I'll do the yellow one and we're going to need a white. So we only need a little bit of the smaller colors because we're just going to do polka dots with it, right? And then I'll do a thing of white. Let me get some water. So to thin out our royal icing, all we have to do is just add a little bit of water. And because this is going to be a wet on wet technique, the flood needs to be the same consistency as the color. So I'm going to go ahead and add just a little bit of water to mine. Now, it doesn't take much. And then I'm going to make my yellow. And if you overdo the water, you just add some more frosting. And it doesn't take, I used way too much food coloring just then. It kind of fell in. You don't need a lot because those colors are so concentrated.
That also saves money with the concentration of the colors.
Yeah, if you get the cheap stuff, you'll be buying it all the time and it won't be as concentrated. So I'm just going to mix.
I guess, did you want me to mix with one of these? Or
I use your spatula here. You can use this one.
Thank you.
Over here hogging up stuff. Okay. So what we want to make sure is that it'll self-level. So you want to make sure that it self-levels, and this still holds a peak. So it's not self-leveling. I just keep adding water until it does. You just do a little bit at a time. And usually when it's this small of an amount, I'll use a dropper so I don't overdo it.
Because then you have to add more water and then add more icing and just keep going back and forth.
And then 2 hours later, you got your color. And a whole lot of it. So they came out really wonderfully. You can't see the stick on the back. I don't know if that's true for all of them. But for these, you can't see the stick on the back. And if you could see the stick on the front, it wouldn't matter because we're going to cover it with royal icing. So it's okay. Everything is okay. It'll be fine.
These smell really, really good, by the way.
I will give you some to taste after that. You know, one time I did a class and the woman ate half her cookie before she even decorated it. I said, I hope you know you just ate half your cookie. I'm not giving you another one. You're going to decorate half that cookie. You're going to walk out of here with just like a sweater. And she ate the sleeve off of it. She said, I couldn't wait. It's like, that's okay. You just have a special sweater today. Okay, so when your royal icing sits for a little while, you need to massage the bag to make sure that it's mixed. See, these are, because they're flood colors, they'll separate faster because they're thinner. But that thick stuff takes forever to separate. So when you have a thick color, you don't have to worry about massaging it every time you pick it up. But when you have a thin flood color, you do. So just make sure that it's not separated, because if you cut it open and you use it after it's been sitting a while and you don't mix it up, it's separated and it's ugly and it's just a mess.
Probably hard to use as well.
It is. So I'm going to just, because all we're doing with white is just flooding, I'm going to cut a little bit larger hole. See that? And then I just hold the bag perpendicular to the cookie and I don't really touch it and I'm kind of going slow. I do realize that I cannot pipe a perfect circle and I'm okay with that. Perfect and profit does not exist in the same space. So it's close enough for government work. Okay, so I just put my first circle down and then I just go fill it in. And I just want you to know, I don't care about it being perfectly filled in because the royal icing settles, right? And then I just go back and fill the lines in. I don't like to put a whole lot of royal icing on the cookie. I don't like royal icing on my cookie. I just like it naked. Now I'm going to put my spots on while it's still wet. And I'm just going to do a smaller polka dot because polka dots are my thing. But we don't have to use polka dots. We could use lines. We could use whatever you want. And I just go ahead on and make my lines of dots.
That's a really easy way to do the dots to make sure it looks good as well.
Yeah, and now I'm just going to pat it to make sure they all sync. You see how they're syncing?
Mm-hmm.
Tell me that's not the most adorable thing. But even more adorable, I'm going to take your orange because I can. Whether you want me to or not. I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then I'm going to go around the outside edge because I think it needs a border. Boom. Look how pretty that is.
That's very nice.
And so if it was a 1-year-old's birthday, you could take gold and just paint a 1 on it. You could just keep these stacked in a container, in the freezer, pull them out as needed. Just let them set out overnight and then let them all be dry. And then you could paint your 1, or you could take an edible marker, write a letter on it for someone's name, or you could paint it on with food coloring. You don't even have to put the dots. You could just leave it plain. And then
there's a lot of designs you can do with those too.
There's just the possibilities are endless.
Oh gosh, oops.
It's just a cookie. If it doesn't come out right, guess what you can do? Wipe it off and start all over again.
Right.
And all that yellow when you're done. So I'm going to do this line thing where you have to drag the stick through the lines to give it a nice little pattern. Have you ever done that?
I've seen it before. I've never tried it.
Totally easy, and it has such a wonderful effect. So you just take your stick and drag it in one direction, wipe your stick, and then go back in the other direction.
I've seen also people make hearts with that kind of design.
Mm-hmm. It's good for everything. I use it on my shirt cookies. I use it on Easter eggs. Whatever I feel like hurry up decorating, that's what I use it for.
That is very pretty. That's super simple.
Super simple. There. And if it doesn't fill in by itself, you just fill it in yourself. And I'm going to take your orange and go around the edge to clean up the edge. Boom. We're done.
Easy peasy. And that took I don't even know.
I love this so much. Girl, cookies make me happy. It's instant gratification. Do you see cookies in your future more? They don't have to be decorated.
Yeah. I have a question.
Yes.
So if you don't like, you like royal icing, right?
Yeah.
So how come you like royal icing, but you don't like sprinkles?
I don't like royal icing. I don't eat cookies like this.
Mm-hmm.
I eat them like this. I don't like that stuff on my cookie. How you feeling?
They're definitely not my best work. Again, I'm not very good at decorating with royal icing, but it's still very fun to do.
It is. It's better than coloring in coloring books, if you ask me. And you're doing great.
Thank
I think
you.
you're doing great. So if I had 400 cookies to do all at once, instead of piping it, I take a pastry brush and dip it in the thing and just paint it on. Works the same. You just paint a big blob of it on, make sure the edges are clean, and keep it moving. Because I've had to do that, and it's not fun, but there you go. Some people dip their cookies, but I don't know. My fingers get too messy, and it stresses me out. I don't like messy fingers.
Yeah, me either. I see why you use the gloves. when I need fondant, like it's just super sticky, and the shortening is everywhere, and
I cannot.
So before we end off the show, I'm going to actually end up trying one of these. I smelt them as they were baking, It is smell amazing. So I'm gonna try one of the ones without the sugar icing. So
Nice snap to it, right?
mm,
Shortbread is supposed to be nice and crisp.
that is very, very good. I'm gonna take this home. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.